All right, all right. Welcome back to In the Future. And today, Max brought up something to me for today's topic that I was like, well, I don't really see how what I'm about to say isn't already the case. And Max says, you know, closed captions are basically going to be the default on every remote that's out there. And Max, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here or afterwards, because of the need to reach more, expand accessibility for viewers. Now, part of what he says is that that's going to result in more international shows being watched by Americans. Now, I personally said, well, aren't we already there? Like, what's number one? I go on. Why do we need it on a remote? I can go in and change it. I'm doing this because I use my PlayStation, and change the the closed caption on all my existing streaming channels. And then point two, I'm like, well, international shows to me are already very famous. We've got Squid Games. We've got Dark from Germany. We've got. I mean, this could go on. I go on Netflix and there's like Japanese shows shown, and then you know your wife watches the Turkish show. I don't even know the name of it, but yeah, tell me. Oh, and make it clear if my point isn't right.
I don't know that. I don't know if your point is right or not, but damn, you just summarized the entire episode into like into like a minute and 30 seconds.
Done.
Okay, so let's start from the top. I'll ask you a
Yeah,
question. I think everything
yeah,
you said is more or less accurate, but let's break it down on what are the trends we're seeing that led us to this point, and then what
hmm
are the future trends and opportunities that I think are going to exist as a result of this change in society.
yeah.
So let me pose this question to you: When you watch movies and shows, do you find yourself watching them with or without closed captions?
I typically watch them with closed caption. Yes.
Okay. Why do you believe that is?
So for myself, so my wife and I both do it. So for myself, I do that because I can grasp the dialogue a lot better. People speak very fast. And don't get me wrong, like I feel like when I don't have them on, I'm understanding the story. But for some reason, there's something, and I think it's the aspect of being a visual learner. When I see the captions show up, I just grasp it a lot better. I don't miss a word. So for me, that's why. And then for my wife, English is not her first language; it's Portuguese, so it helps her. Like she's a big reader, so she reads English books all the time, novels and stuff. So it helps her grasp and miss words that she might miss because of that.
Interesting. I've I've noticed when I go over to people's houses and we watch something together, the captions are by default almost always on. And if
It's our
not,
house, yeah.
we'll watch maybe 60 seconds of something and then they're like, "No, I can't understand a single." We'll do the same thing. Like I can't understand
Yeah.
a single thing this person is saying.
hmm
Click and
Well,
turn them on.
you just brought up another something interesting that just made me think though. What about like the volume variances? Like we all kind of hear at different levels. And my like, for example, my wife is like, the TV is super loud, and for me, I'm like, no, it's not at all.
She's like an old lady.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, or I'm the old guy because I'm like, what? It's not loud at all. I need to hear it, and we'll lower the volume obviously to just for her, and then I'll be like, well, then I need captions because I don't want to miss anything. So I wonder if
Yeah.
that's another reason.
It definitely could be. This is a whole other topic. I think that in the
Yeah.
future, it's going to become much more popular for everyday people to wear a hearing aid. This, I
Hmm.
think, is the consequence of us
Interesting.
wearing AirPods and listening to music at really loud decibels, whereas previous generations, they had the record player, right, or the radio and
Hmm.
things like that.
Oh
I'm
wow.
obviously skipping things in between, but just a thought, something to ponder on in
That's
the future.
yeah. Sorry, not to skew left, but that's very interesting. I are we? Do you know if that's a known thing so far? Because we're not the first generation with headphones, are we? Or they came out in the '80s, if I'm not mistaken. Like
I
are
don't I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, no, there's definitely something there, but it's also like the prevalence of it, right? And
yeah,
how just how much more we listen to music is at what volume and like what are the concerts, right? Concerts are just also very loud.
yeah, yeah.
Has that changed? Has it not? I don't know. Up for debate. Save it for a different episode.
Okay,
But
okay. That's a good
I
topic. Bookmark that.
I
Yeah.
would say though, I see the thread for captions as something as being more connected to social media, right? I think, and social media spans several generations, and so it's interesting to observe that on something like TikTok or on Instagram, when you watch a video, almost by default, the captions are either going to be burned in or they're going to be just like easily turned on and accessible.
Right.
Captions were, that's I think that that movement is fantastic because it makes content, especially video and audible content, accessible to far more people with hearing problems, people with visual problems. You could have a screen reader that kind of reads the captions for you. So I think that captions started off my take on like if I was designing TikTok, TikTok,
Tic
I
Tac.
would I would think if I had the problem in front of me of okay, we have people watching our content X number of hours per day. Can we expand their viewership if they can watch uh, the TikTok feed in the office when they're at work and don't have to have the volume on? Interesting. Will that get
Oh.
them to watch it more? How do
Mm.
we get them to watch it more? You add captions so that they still understand the content that they're consuming, but now they don't need the audio. That's kind of cool.
That is interesting. That is something I've never even thought about. You're probably absolutely right. That's is has anybody mentioned that before, or is that just you theorizing?
I don't know. Probably just me. Not sure. I'm
Okay.
sure.
Well,
I'm sure other people think about this stuff though.
oh, totally though. But I mean, like that makes sense. You're out in public. You watch a video. You don't want to. I mean, I know there's
On the
people that
train,
blast their
right? You,
sound,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
people that don't care. But like, yeah, if you're one of those that do care, you turn down the volume. You can still watch your videos, and also incorporating it into like any type of algorithm that does translations or AI translations, you can have an audience that no matter where you are, you may not have the audio of that video, but you'll understand it because depending on the country that you're in, you just translate the text or the
Yeah.
subtitles into whatever language.
Far more
Great.
accessible, right? I think people
Yeah.
mistakenly think that the word accessibility just means that you have some kind of disability, let's say, and so that
Yeah.
you need these special tools to kind of bridge the gap. But
Hmm.
accessibility is good for everyone, right? If you make
Yep.
something accessible, like one of my favorite examples, I forget what the thing is called, but if you're walking down the street and you want to get on the sidewalk, there's like a little ramp, usually, right? Like at the end of the sidewalk, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. 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 It
Right,
just
and
has
and
like
that
the dip, the little dip
yeah,
into
and
the street. Yeah.
that dip is for like UPS drivers to bring the dolly up, things like that. But
Stroller.
stroller, those things, right? But initially, it was created for wheelchairs, right, for wheelchair access because it was an accessibility thing. But it's such a clear and beautiful example of how accessibility that's made for the accessibility market is actually good for everyone.
Yeah.
Versus on something like websites where everyone thinks, oh, this website has to be Cato compliant or accessible, which means we can no longer have it be pretty. We can no longer do this. Like it's a limitation. Versus if you do it right, becomes accessible to far more people and you get far more audience and more traffic. So, side note, accessibility, which I'm passionate about. But going back, so having these captions in videos allows for more accessibility. I
Hmm.
think that as a result of just spending so much time on TikTok, on Instagram, reading these captions, our brains are just rewired. And so
Hmm.
now when we're watching TV, I feel it too. It is challenging to not watch it
Without.
without captions. I almost miss it.
Yeah.
I feel like I need it in order to process. Otherwise, I feel like I'm missing something. Kind of to your
Yeah.
earlier point.
Yeah, improves comprehension. Like, I mean, maybe because we're so used to it, but like, I don't know. Like, you ever watch a movie or a show and then you hear the dialogue while you're reading it, but you missed like you didn't actually hear one of the words or that they've actually mentioned. Like, I don't know. Like, I heard something completely different from the caption. You ever have that? I mean, I've had that once in a blue where I'm like, whoa, I didn't. If had I not read that, I would have thought he said something completely different
Sure.
because of an accent or something along those lines.
Yeah. For me, it's I also notice that like if I'm watching something, there's a lot for some reason there's a lot of shows in the U.S. which in some way are like the Americans, right? Obviously talking
Mhm.
about the Cold War, the Russians, things like that. So I hear a lot of Russian speak in American shows and American movies. And for
Mhm.
me, my brain shuts down when I hear audible Russian because I understand it and I read the English subtitles, I miss the entire thing entirely. My brain just
Interesting.
cannot process hearing it. And because usually what you hear is different from how it actually translates into
It's
English
trans.
subtitles,
Yeah.
I'm like, I completely miss this. I either have to turn off the subtitles or I have
Yeah,
to just close my eyes and listen to the Russian stuff so that I can understand it. So
interesting.
it's like some weird brain gap that exists. But
Crossing your wires.
exactly. But
Yeah,
one of the good things that I think that will happen with closed captioning is just how seamless it should be to turn on closed captioning, right?
yeah.
Every single platform from Hulu to HBO to Prime, they all have a very different user experience for how do you actually
Mhm.
go in, how do you turn it on. So I think one of the things that we're going to see is future remote controls that are going to be manufactured are going to have a built-in CC button that just
Do we
makes
not
it
have
this.
that now? I guess that was my question.
Some do, and I think it's a good question. But I would say most remotes no longer have it.
Yeah,
Whereas I feel like it used to be part of a standard remote control.
yeah,
My
because I
Samsung remote
remember.
doesn't have it. My LG remote doesn't have it.
Yeah, I don't think I have it either. To be honest, I think controllers. But to be fair, and not this is not to skew the topic, but controls have also gone into a more minimal design. Like they've tried to design them more minimally, whereas like those '90s remotes had every button in the world on them. Like if you remember, it's just like a bunch
Yeah,
of buttons. Like my LG remote control, I think only has like 4 buttons on it.
yeah. And so they
But
rely on each app to actually create their own experience, which I think it
yeah,
should be standardized from an accessibility point of view.
to make
Everyone
it
should know how to get it easily.
yeah, make it like a power like it should be as simple as vital as a power button, basically. Like
Yeah,
before,
and
not it wasn't.
yeah, and I think that it's becoming so in demand. Whether you agree that it's the result of social media, closed captioning, but we need closed captioning now, right? And so
Hmm.
it needs to be one click away. How do you make it one click away? You either built it into every single app in a very standardized way, or you add it
Hmm.
as a remote control button. I would argue that for people with some kind of disability, like whether you're vision impaired or whatever, you should it's irresponsible for remote controls to not have a button where I can just easily tap into
Press
it,
it.
and just make it accessible for everyone. So that's one. Also, accessibility is becoming such a big part of our society now. It's just mainstream and it's legally mandated for a lot of websites. Like a lot of companies are getting lawsuits filed
Always.
against them if the websites are not Cato compliant or things like that, which is good. We're moving in the right direction of making it accessible for all. So I think like we're going to start seeing more and more of these kind of easy to access tools so that everyone can have a level playing field.
Totally, totally. I can definitely see that. And I mean, the other value that I can see to that, besides being able to turn it on easy, is the fact that people that I know a lot of people that in the US that come to this country and they don't really they're learning English and it becomes almost like a learning tool. Again, I'm not saying this
A good
particular
one.
thing is the reason to have a button, but it's just about to make it easy for them, right? Like think of the old grandma coming from a country that doesn't speak English. You think she's going to know how to manage the software to get to, through the menu? Oh, where do I choose subtitles? The language? Do I give her my PlayStation controller or my remote control? Actually, I just think of my own mom. Like she'll never be able to manage with the PlayStation controller. She knows the classic controller, and that could be a way for them to turn on the subtitles to hear the show. Hopefully, becomes universal. You have every language as a. I think most shows have like more than like 5 or 10 languages in subtitles, and lets them enjoy it, right? Gives them easy access to, hey, put on a show for grandma or somebody who's just coming. They don't have to be old, right? They could be young as well. Just make it easy for them to understand and learn English by listening to it and seeing the subtitles in their own language.
That's a very good point. I've heard more than a handful of people, especially people who immigrated to this country, that was one of the best ways for them to pick up the language and just like how things
Yeah.
are pronounced, because you just visually and you read it at the same time. When you combine those two, you're just it clicks, right? And after a
Hmm.
while, you kind of get it. That's why people in other
Yep.
countries, when they try to sound American, I'm putting it in quotes. It's always
Hmm.
like that funny. I can't even do that accent because they suck
Yeah.
at accents, but you know what I'm talking about. Where they
Yeah. Or they talk like somebody on Friends or something. Yeah.
yes, or
Yeah.
like
Like
from the '80s, like
from the
a
'80s.
soundtrack from the
Yeah.
'80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
exactly that.
Okay, and then leading us to the next point, which is what you mentioned in the intro. What's the what's the consequence or the byproduct of having captions being more prevalent in society and in how we enjoy our movies and shows? I think that by having captions, it's normalizing shows and movies that are international, right? So other shows in other languages. I think one, at least in my opinion, one of the breakthrough movies that really kind of solidified this for me was what was that? What was that Asian film?
Snowpiercer.
No. It was like 2 years ago. Uh, kind of
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Parasite. No,
Parasite.
Parasite. Yeah, yeah.
Parasite. Parasite was, and it won so many awards because it was just so well made. And even though there were captions, they were speaking in a different language, obviously. We were reading it and we were
Hmm.
still able to relate with the characters. It was just very well made and well connected. That's why it's won so many awards.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think
And a
that,
movie out of Korea, which is yeah, I don't think has done that
yeah,
before.
yeah, and Netflix has obviously taken the lead on this out of all the platforms. They're the ones I'm seeing that are just like wall to wall in some categories of international
I think
films.
you're right.
They're actually doing a very interesting trick I've noticed where they no longer even label it as an international or a foreign film. They let you be captivated by the few seconds of the trailer, at which
Hmm.
point you go, huh.
I'm watching
Obviously,
that.
what this guy is saying doesn't match his mouth movement, which tells me that it's an international film. But the plot
Yeah,
is interesting. I'm hooked. And once you're in it, you just turn on the captions or the subtitles in that case, and you just watch it just like that. And so I think that the result of having these closed captioning, of having closed captions be more popular, is resulting in people being more accepting of foreign
yeah.
films. And I think that by having more foreign films be part of our society, that content is going to shape our culture, where hopefully American
More.
society is more welcoming and broader,
Yeah,
um, and just mixed in general
yeah.
with
And I think
everyone
we
speaking different languages.
yeah, and 2 points on that. So number one, I think the engine to that is that it's gotten a lot easier to do subtitling and dubbing, right? Like with the technology that we have, hopefully with AI even easier. So like, do we have no excuse to not have every language, or the top 50 languages spoken in the world, without a doubt. And then to your point about the openness, it's like, I think regardless, and this is just my opinion, I think regardless of what we see in the news all the time, I actually think America progressively is becoming more welcoming. There's a lot of fear mongering in the news, but I think we are like, I think the Gen Z generation, I think our generation was already more open than the previous generation. And the Gen Z, I think, is even more open and grew up in a world where they're ingesting anime from Japan and watching shows on Netflix from Europe, and I think they're much more well aware of the media from different places around the world. And I think that'll just get, or the UK being having very, Peaky Blinders, all these shows. I know we don't,
Mhm.
maybe we consider the UK not as international because it's English speaking, but I mean, a lot of their media has really gone mainstream in America as well. And I think maybe the younger generation will do that even further. I don't know. We might even just become this crazy blend. I know we talk about this going less global, less globalization, but I think when it comes to media, you can't stop that. I think media from all over the world is just blending together.
Yeah.
Russian memes, Brazilian
Mhm.
memes, like, and I think it's the same thing with this with the streaming. It'll make it more welcoming for sure.
Yeah, just consuming content is far easier if if you're able to process it easily, and captions allow you to do that, subtitles allow you to do that. I hope that the byproduct is positive and that people are more welcoming of putting it in quotes others. But
Others,
at the
yeah,
minimum, at least they get content that is, by definition, going to be different, right? The plots are
yeah.
different, the actors are different, the mannerisms are different. It's cool. One of
Hmm.
the other positive byproducts that I think we're going to see from this is people are going to be more willing to travel more, because traveling and the barrier in communication is sort of going away. Like you and I were just in Barcelona,
Mhm.
And sounds like we went on a romantic romantic tangent, but
Yeah,
if you weren't there speaking Spanish, we would have to rely on other things. But there are other tools like
yeah.
apps that make
Google's
it far easier to just like almost have a live conversation with people. Now, that's a
totally.
language barrier, but I would also say that there are similar tools to people who are deaf or hard of hearing communicating with someone like us, right? They're
Hmm.
able to have an app where what I'm saying shows up right on their screen because it's
Hmm.
transcribed. I think Google Transcribe is a very popular one. Like that is a barrier in communication that is being
Incredible.
solved. So, are we going to see more travel? Maybe. Are we going to
Hmm.
see that barrier between deaf and hard of hearing people and whatever we're called,
Hmm.
that go that
Yeah.
that bridge going away, or that gap going away and getting bridged? Maybe. I also think
Yeah.
that doing business between different countries is going to become far more accessible as well. Because why wouldn't you?
Hmm.
If prices are cheaper in the Philippines and we can work and ship products from them, and we can now communicate, why wouldn't
Hmm.
that be the new world that we're stepping into? And I think all of
Yeah.
this is the result of a very simple thing, which is closed captioning. I'm obviously buttoning
Yeah.
it up in like a beautiful little box and bow, but there's some
Yeah.
thread
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, totally, totally. In a perfect in a world in a peaceful global world, yeah, I totally think that would be the case for sure. I think, I mean, we have a pretty globalized economy right now, right? Don't you think? Like we think about like the Fivers of the world, the Upworks. People outsource stuff to other countries because it's cheaper. We do business with but it might, but to your point, might make it less friction, right, to do
Mhm.
business with those countries because we have things don't get lost in translation as maybe they used to, or even culturally, like the nuances of culture. For example, like Japanese culture, like an American might show up before in the 80s or 90s and be kind of brash and be like, hey, how you guys doing? And shake the hand. And they're all very like more harmonized and together and just quieter, or more subtle about their communication. And, and things could get lost, right? Money talks, but things get lost. But when we watch all this content that we grew up with, like Gen Z specifically, because I think they're going to grow up more around it, or maybe the alpha generation, the ones after them, they'll have more of a sense of these cultural nuances between each other that they might almost melt and meet in the middle even. So that Japanese businessman in the future, or businesswoman in the future, with the American's actually more subtle than they used to be, and the Japanese might be a little bit more, a little more expressive than they used to
Mm.
be in the past. And we start because they start each other's content, and just kind of content became global. You're making me think about something. It's almost like, as much as the world, almost like the positive side of social media, I guess, or content or online content, as much as the physical world or political world is becoming less globalized at the moment, or like kind of retracting, I think the everyday civil, and I know we've got politicized content, but like the everyday civilian that makes non-politicized content, making, let's say, video game content, skateboarding content, sports content, fitness content, everybody from every country can relate to that. And the content is like truly democratized. Everybody can come together, and we all have hobbies no matter what kind of country or politics you live under, and we can all ingest that content in media, movies, shows, hobbies. So that's kind of a positive. You kind of made me think, and it's funny that closed caption, something we kind of take for granted, or I took for granted, could be that thread to just keeping us all together while world leaders are contemplating some other thing. The everyday people are kind of closer together because of this communication language barrier being crushed.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And what's really kind of at the root of that is what are the benefits of travel, right? Like I unfortunately don't travel as much as I would like to. I think I will moving forward though. The Barcelona trip really opened up my eyes to some things.
Good.
But one of the obvious benefits of travel has been for years, it's exposure to other cultures, exposure to how people do things differently from you. And then you bring that back home and you influence, the people around you. It influences your life. That's gone for since, people have traveled beyond their village, right?
Hmm.
They were able to learn from others and also bring in some of their part. I think that one of the things that I think that that benefit is going to carry over to content and influence people in spite of them not traveling as much, right? So like,
Yes. Yeah.
that's kind of a very interesting thing. Like, so like if I watch a Japanese show or a Korean show or a Korean soap opera, I'm able to pick up on their culture and their nuances on how they kind
Hmm.
of interact with each other, and like who knows what I'm going to pick up and carry over into my everyday.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because you
that's
could
actually
do that.
a cool byproduct of it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without
Because you
having
could
to
do that.
travel.
100%. Like so, 100%. You could do that for every culture has a positive, right? So like that, like perfect example, right? Like for the sake of not offending anybody, I'm not going to give examples, but you can take, I'll use America since we live here. Like, oh, Americans are very confident and, they've got like this optimism. That's something that like people in Europe or in Asia or in Africa, Africans are pretty optimistic somewhat, but like, yeah, these other countries that typically are more like, think of French people who, again, not to offend, French are going to come after me, are more of a pessimistic culture. They can start to learn a little bit more from America from an optimistic perspective. Whereas maybe since I've already used them, I'll use them as an example. Americans can maybe learn from the French how to be a little bit more, have more of an artistic kind of view on food or like
Mhm.
art. Be sensible to things, have a little bit more of like a passion for seeing things with an artistic eye and not be so like you know, just cold about food, like Soylent. They'll be like Soylent about food. Like I'm going to drink Soylent every day. Instead, let's enjoy the pure, organic forms of food and understand it as an art. So just those little
Yeah,
things, right? And that can formulate. That could be a very positive thing for everybody.
I know we have to wrap it up. I think just as a final thought, this isn't a new concept, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
of consuming content in the United States from other countries. There's a real craving for it. If you think back
Mm-hmm.
to like when did let's see, so the French Chef, which I don't know if you know, but the French Chef was a very popular book, and then became a show by Julia Child. I'm sure you know who that is.
The
No,
actress.
Julia Child
Oh,
is
Julia Child. No, no, of course, yes, yes. She's the cooking show.
she's a chef,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And she and people Americans really got behind this book and the show when it went public, because it was a new culture, right? It was bringing
Yeah.
France into the homes of everyday Americans and giving them a taste of literally a taste of something that they have never seen before, which was very
Yep.
cool. So I think that today we have more opportunity to do that through more content, right? Through more shows. And I hope
Easily.
that Netflix is not the only one who's going to be leading the wave on this. I hope that Hulu, I see, is also making strides there, but like HBO Prime, like
Mhm.
make it more in your face about, or invest more into these international shows, especially if it's going to benefit, if it's going to shape positively this country.
Totally. And I'll add one last thing to that before we wrap up. It also tells a lot of stories we haven't told, like that
Absolutely.
haven't been told. Like I would say, like easily, we've seen a bunch of cowboy shows, Civil War shows, World War II shows. We've seen samurais. We've seen, kung fu, like ancient China. We've seen France Revolutionary Wars, but we haven't seen those stories about like ancient Africa, right? Like the deeper stories about Eastern Africa. Yes, we know the Egyptians and ancient Egypt, but what about the western side of Africa? Or have we told a story about Thailand and Laos and historically what's happened there? New Zealand, Australia, South America, Latin America. Those aren't really like mainstream stories that have been rehashed a million times. And could really be a fresh take on what we could stories to be told. What's an example? I saw like an indie movie about like the indigenous people in Greenland, and I was like, wow, I would have never. And like it's not even in Danish because Greenland's part of Denmark. It was in the language of the tribe, the people that live there, and I was like, I would have never have even knew these people existed, and they have this incredible history and story that is just as deep as anywhere else, and I would have never known that because it's just not one of the mainstream rehashes of knights, samurais, and whatever else is out there that we keep hearing about.
Great points. Great
Yeah.
points. We'll save this for another topic, but one of the things that I see on the horizon, I think there's going to be more of an appetite for everyday people to learn sign language,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just another way of communicating with a culture that has those same stories that don't get exposed to, have like feelings and conversations that we don't have exposure to. I actually got this idea from the boys, where the show The Boys,
Mm-hmm.
where the Asian girl, she not only speaks in sign language,
Oh
but
yeah,
she
she's.
has shorthand sign language, which is, if anyone's going to take advantage of that, it's going to be like the younger Gen Z and below that generations,
What's that?
where
Sorry, what's shorthand sign language?
so like you create your own, like this can mean, I bet it's offensive, but like that can mean something that only you and I understand, or like only a click understands. So
Interesting.
you have like signs that
Right.
other people outside of the click don't get, and that's something that
Whoa.
every new generation loves to be a part of, right? Like pig Latin is a ridiculous
Yeah.
example, but you know what I'm talking about.
I'll add to your point. Like we actually teach a lot of babies get taught sign language more, like milk. Like
Yeah.
hungry, milk. So just like base that can get then ingrained
Yeah.
as they grow up.
And it's almost like it's going to be like a modern day version of subtitles, of captions. On that topic, I recommend people watch the movie Coda, Coda. It's a very cool representation there's a deaf family member, or I think the entire family is deaf, and then this one girl, she's able to speak, and you just see a completely different side of people, and just like the dynamics of a family in that situation that I've never had exposure to. I thought it was super cool. I recommend Coda.
All right, check that
Wrap it
out.
here.
All right, sounds good. See
Later.
you
Good
guys next
talk.
time.